You are very welcome back. Now, our next guest won the Best Irish Published Book of the Year at this year's Board Gosh Energy Irish Book Awards for her fabulous book, The Glass Shore. The book follows on from the award-winning The Long Gaze Back, an anthology of Irish women writers. But this time, Sinead Gleeson focused on the short stories of Irish women writers from Northern Ireland. Sinead joins us now to tell us more. Sinead, welcome as always.
Welcome, Sinead.
Congratulations on book number 2, and also congratulations on winning on the night.
I know, I didn't expect it because obviously The Long Gaze Back had won last year, and people kept saying, do you really think you're going to win?
Lightning can't strike twice, but it did.
No, it didn't. And as somebody, I literally came out of one of the rooms when they interview afterwards and somebody said, well done, like the Dubs, winning 2 in a row, which hadn't occurred to me. But no, it was brilliant. And more than that, I was delighted for the writers because, it's, especially if you're writing in the short story, they can get overlooked sometimes, even if you put out a collection yourself. So there were 25 women who were all delighted about this on the night. So
and you really are great at championing Irish women writers and kind of going, hey, we're here too, hello, pay attention.
Yeah, well, I think for a long time, and the reason why I did the 2 books is because I noticed this big gap that when you pick up anthologies, an anthology is just a lovely grab bag of all different types of writers in one book. So you get it's like a literary mixtape almost. You get to see all sorts of writing, which is why I love them. And I noticed that over the years, so many of the books were really heavily dominated by men, and it was the same men, and a handful of great women like Edna O'Brien or...
But the same names again and again and again.
Over and Mary Lav and Elizabeth Bone, who were wonderful, but you'd think that nobody else was writing, and it just felt like things needed to be shaken up. And, it's funny, when the Long Gaze Back one last year, it was the same month that Waking the Feminists had happened at the Abbey, and it was just, again, the idea that this omission happens really casually. So if you
do seem to have caught the zeitgeist with these books. Yeah,
and I think, you can talk about it and give out about it and go on Twitter about it, but if it's more important to actually step up and do something. So I decided I would do it, and there's a lot of work in putting a book together like this.
I was just about to say, I don't know if people think this is just a question of cutting and pasting a load of short stories together, but first of all, you have to choose the short stories, which is no mean feat in and of itself.
Yeah, because you're you're creating a book that a lot of people are going to look at and go, what's in here? Why is it in there? Who's not in here? So you read an awful lot. And for this book, because it was specifically the north of Ireland...
Why did you make it specifically the north of Ireland?
Well, what happened was I did a lot of events for The Long Gaze Back, and I went to Belfast and did 2 big events. One was in the Lyric Theatre, and afterwards there was a Q&A, and there was lots of women saying, great book, love this, wonderful. We don't have a book like this, and where's our book? And then it sort of spilled out into the foyer, and I talked to loads of women who felt Northern Irish women's voices, and the short story in particular had been really overlooked over there, and they just said, we'd love a book like this. And I was thinking about it and going, I think I'm going to have to do this. So I sort of went with my shovel into the National Library, digging through the archives, which is what you have to do. You have to do an awful lot of stuff that's out of print, stuff that's hard to find. I wanted to put dead and living writers in, so you could acknowledge all the writers who went before, who were writing when it was much harder for women to write and get published.
And do you want the stories to work as a whole as well as individuals? Like, is it kind of like a meal when you're doing your starter, your main course and your dessert? Does there need to be an arc, or do you just put in stories that just sing off the page in their own right?
That's a great question, actually. I never thought of it like that. When you put a book together, you realise afterwards that lots of stories end up talking to each other, and you didn't realise that would happen.
Stories within a story.
Stories within a story. And I know, like in The Long Gaze Back, Lucy Caldwell had a very autobiographical story about a baby that's very sick, and then she said it reminded her, it talked to Maeve Brennan's story, which is about a child that dies. And sort of there's lots of stories in this book that are quite comic, and even some of the older stories are very funny to me and very feminist, and about sort of women getting the better of men who are Egypts, to be honest. So a lot of stuff you see overlaps that you don't see at the time, and there's lots of stories. The name The Glass Shore just came to me out of nowhere, and then when I looked back at the finished book, I was like, lots of these stories are set by the sea. There's a lot of water in it, and I didn't connect that straight away.
Maybe subconsciously there was something going on.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that the short story is something, if you don't have time to read, it's a wonderful sort of very immersive. It's 10 or 12 pages that you spend with the writer, and you can read one a night and then just close the book, and then the next time you might be in a different world, in a different city, with a whole set of characters, and that's what I love about it. And you don't know where you're going to be thrown into.
It's an incredibly difficult art form as well, the short story, and I think it's almost sometimes underestimated how difficult it is to write a great short story.
Yeah, I think so. One of my favourite writers is Laurie Moore, the American writer, and she says that the novel is a marriage and the short story is an affair, which I think is great. But she also says,
like that line.
And I think there's a lot of people who only write short stories because they're very hard to do. You can't put a foot wrong. There can't be a spare word. You have to get in and out very quickly in about 10 pages. So to be able to make a whole world in such a short space of time is, I think, a very specific kind of gift. And I think a lot of the writers in this book do that really well.
Were there some that had to make the cut and were kind of heartbreaking decisions where you were like, oh, I've only got so many pages in this book.
Yeah, I mean, 25 was, and the word count is bigger for the stories in this one, but one of the writers in this book, Janet McNeill, who wrote lots of novels and lots of short stories, I couldn't find any stories by her, and I wasn't sure they exist. And I did an event this year in Belfast, and a woman said to me, I'm doing a PhD in Queens.
And she'd unearthed one, has she?
I found 5 in a dusty old box in Queens, and they do exist, and they were only published in a newspaper, the Belfast Telegraph. So they've never been in a book. So Janet McNeill's story has never been in a book ever, and it's in this book.
So it's her first time being published in this book?
Yeah, because she didn't have enough stories for adults that would have made a collection. So stuff like that makes it really worthwhile, and you bring writers to a new audience.
I was just about to say, now I know it's been incredibly received down here. I'm assuming it's been given a rapturous welcome in the north of Ireland. Yeah,
absolutely, because I think for a long time, and Lucy Caldwell, a brilliant young writer who's in both books, said, when she was growing up in the north of Ireland, a lot of the discourse was focused on, you heard in politics, it was all male voices, and you heard Michael Longley and Seamus Heaney, and you didn't really hear women's voices, even though there were lots of brilliant women like Anne Devlin, who's in both books. So yeah, I think up there, it's felt like there hasn't been a book like this that's just short stories and all female, so it felt long overdue and about time to do it.
Well, congratulations, Sinead. A great service you have done for women on both sides of the border and probably on a global level, because they're great gifts to send abroad if you've got Irish family abroad. But I have to say, if you haven't read The Long Gaze Back, do get it, and obviously get The Glass Shore as well. A nice little twin set for Christmas under anyone's tree. Man or woman, they will adore it. Sinead, thank you so much. Pleasure as always. Looking forward to the next one, because I'm sure there is going to be another one, isn't there?
No, I'm trying to do my own writing at the moment, so we'll see. No comment.
Yeah, you've done enough for the writers. Focus on yourself for a while.
Thank you.
Sinead, pleasure as always. Now, if you would like to see Sinead win the Irish Book of the Year for The Glass Shore, log on to the irishbookawards.ie to vote.